Okay, let's get into it. Today, we are taking a deep dive into HEX, the ERC20 token, launched way back in December 2019 by Richard Schuler, who is much better known in the crypto world as Richard Heart.
This is a really fascinating one.
Yeah.
And definitely complex. HEX is unique because it tries to fuse a very traditional financial tool, the certificate of deposit, with the Wild West mechanics of decentralized finance.
Right. So our mission for you today is basically threefold. We're going to unpack the very intricate staking system at its core.
Then we'll review the specific, and I mean highly technical, findings from its 2019 security audit.
And finally, we have to synthesize all the controversy, and there is a lot of it surrounding the project and its founder, which all kind of culminates in that massive SEC lawsuit.
The core idea, though, is pretty simple on the surface. A certificate of deposit, a CD, but on the blockchain.
Exactly. In a normal bank, you lock up your money for a fixed time, you get a better guaranteed return. HEX just digitizes that whole concept. You stake your HEX, and you get rewarded for holding onto it for the long term.
Precisely. They call this the proof-of-weight protocol. The entire system is built around this idea of staking. Users lock up their HEX for a set period, and that period can be, as short as 1 day
or as long as 5,555 days.
Which is just over 15 years.
15 years. In crypto time, that's like a geological epoch. So what do you get for that kind of commitment? The project was advertising some really eye-popping returns, wasn't it?
Oh, they certainly were. The claim was an average APY, an annual percentage yield, that hovered somewhere around 40%. But, and this is crucial, that number depends heavily on how many other people are staking and, of course, the length of your own lockup.
Okay, we need to slow down here because 40% sounds, it sounds incredible, especially when you look at the tokenomics. Our sources show the contract's inflation, the new coins it creates, is only about 3.69% over a whole year.
Right.
So if the inflation is only 3.69%, how on earth do people get 40% returns? Where does the extra yield come from?
That is the pivotal question. And the answer comes down to two big things: the share mechanism and the penalties.
The penalties, okay.
So when you stake your HEX, your tokens are actually burned. They're taken out of circulation for that time.
Yeah.
In exchange, you get something called T-shares.
T-shares, so that's the key.
That's the key. It stands for trust shares. It's the unit of your staking power. These T-shares are what collect the daily interest from that 3.69% inflation pool. Your final payout is based on how many T-shares you have versus everyone else.
Ah, okay.
But here's the critical part. A huge chunk of that high APY comes directly from the penalties paid by other users.
So when other people make a mistake or break their commitment, that money directly benefits the people who stick to the rules.
Yes. It's behavioral engineering built right into the code. It's designed to reward commitment and very actively punish short-term thinking or just forgetting about your stake.
Let's get into those penalties because they sound severe. What about the early or emergency unstake?
If you pull out early, the penalty is calculated on a minimum of 90 days or half of your committed days, rounded up, whichever is longer. But here's the kicker. If you unstake too early, like before half your time is served, the penalty is so harsh, it can actually cut into your principal.
Wait, not just the interest you've earned, but the actual money you put in to begin with.
Your principal, yes. That sounds less like a CD and more like a high-stakes contract where, someone else's failure becomes a revenue stream for the reward pool.
So all that penalty money just gets redistributed to the loyal stakers.
Precisely. It makes the system kind of self-funding through user behavior.
And the late penalty is just as bad, right? I assume it's to stop people from just setting a 15-year stake and forgetting it exists.
It is truly punitive. Once your stake ends, you get a 14-day grace period. After that, your return drops by about 0.143% every single day you're late.
Which adds up fast.
It's about 1% a week, and it can go all the way to zero. The sources highlight a crazy but very real possibility if you are 700 days late.
Just under 2 years.
In ending your stake, you get exactly 0 HEX back. Doesn't matter what your principal was, all of it is forfeited and redistributed to everyone else who's still actively staking.
So someone could lock up millions of dollars, forget about it for 2 years after it matures, and their entire principal just vanishes and gets handed out to the rest of the class.
It's a profound automated redistributive effect. The system demands your attention.
You also mentioned a share rate mechanism. What's that about?
Right, so that's designed to make sure that the longer and bigger stakes always pay better over time. It deals with inflation. Every time a stake ends, the ROI from that stake gets factored into the price of a T-share.
So the price of a T-share only ever goes up?
It perpetually increases. The idea is really elegant. If you just cashed out a huge stake, you should only be able to get back in with, at best, the same number of T-shares, but probably fewer.
So it forces newer, smaller stakers to pay more for their share of the pie. It locks in the advantage for the early birds and the long-term holders.
It's the definition of incentivizing commitment with code.
Okay, let's switch gears to the launch. Back in 2019, the ways you could get HEX were just as manipulative as the penalties. There were two main paths: BTC claims and something called transform lobbies.
Right. For the BTC claim, the contract took a snapshot of the Bitcoin blockchain. It then issued 10,000 HEX for every single Bitcoin someone held. And what was clever was, you didn't spend your Bitcoin.
How'd it work then?
You just used your Bitcoin private keys to sign a message that pointed to the Ethereum address where you wanted the HEX to go.
That sounds almost too good to be true, but of course there were strings attached. The first was this automatic stake rule.
A huge forcing function.
Yeah.
When you claimed your HEX, 90% of it was automatically staked for a minimum of 350 days.
Wow.
You only got 10% of it liquid. So even if you wanted to just dump your free coins, most of your bag was locked up for almost a year, which provided, some inherent price support.
And they also tried to discourage the biggest players, the whales, from grabbing too much at once with this silly whale penalty.
Yes. Any claim over 1,000 Bitcoin was scaled down. So if you tried to claim 10,000 BTC worth of HEX, you'd only get credited for about 2,500 BTC. It was a progressive penalty.
Did it actually work? I mean, did it stop the whales?
Not really. The white paper itself admitted that a big holder could just split their BTC across a bunch of different wallets before the snapshot and get around the penalty completely.
Hey, of course. But on the other side, they really incentivized small users to spread the word with a referral system.
A very aggressive one. The referrer got a 20% bonus on the claim value, and the new person got an extra 10% for using the link. The sources even confirmed you could self-refer. You could just generate your own link to maximize your own claim.
Classic. And what about all the HEX that was tied to Bitcoin that nobody ever claimed? That was the we are all Satoshi idea.
Right, that unclaimed portion didn't just disappear. After the claim period ended, it was all paid out in one big lump sum to all the active stakers based on their T-share holdings. So if you were an early, long-term staker, you directly profited from other people not participating.
It's an almost adversarial system. The non-participants literally fund the participants.
Okay, what about the other method, the transform lobbies?
That was basically a continuous auction. Every day, users could send Ethereum into a daily lobby. At the end of the day, all that ETH was tallied up, and you could claim a proportional share of a new batch of HEX.
And where did that HEX come from?
It was converted from 13/50th of the unclaimed Bitcoin supply from the day before. So it created this pipeline where unclaimed HEX was recycled and sold for ETH for nearly a year.
Unbelievably complex. Okay, so with all this complexity, let's talk about the security audit. CoinFabric looked at the smart contracts in late 2019. What was the verdict?
The top-line conclusion was surprisingly positive. They found no critical or medium severity issues. They called the contracts well-written and properly documented. For early adopters, that was a huge stamp of approval.
But the devil is always in the details. The two minor findings they flagged were actually pretty insightful. Let's start with the replay signature vulnerability. This was tied to that BTC claim process. The issue is that the digital signature only included the first 8 bytes of a specific hash. CoinFabric warned that this was theoretically a bit too short.
Short enough for someone to actually exploit it.
Potentially. Their math showed an attacker with some serious hardware. They specifically mentioned a cluster of 8 Tesla V100 GPUs could eventually find a hash collision.
And what would that let them do?
They could reuse a legit signature to credit the 20% referral bonus to themselves. They'd basically be stealing the bonus, not the main claim.
So why was that only classified as minor? It sounds like a pretty big deal.
Well, mostly because the probability was so low and it didn't affect the core function. Still, the HEX team took it seriously. They later increased the prefix length to 12 bytes, which made an attack exponentially harder.
Okay, but the second finding sounds way more catastrophic, especially for the most committed users, the excessive gas issue.
Oh, this was a serious, almost project-killing oversight. The function was called Calc Payout Rewards. It's the one that calculates all your interest when you end a stake.
And the problem was?
The function was designed to loop for every single day of the stake. And the original maximum stake was max stake days, which was 18,200 days, 50 years.
So the code has to run 18,200 loops to close the longest stakes. That must cost a fortune in gas fees.
Not just a fortune. It was impossible. The simulation showed it would cost 14.6 million gas. But at the time, the Ethereum block gas limit was only 8 million.
Wait, so you're saying the transaction literally wouldn't fit in a block? So anyone who made a 50-year commitment,
Right.
the most loyal users, would have been physically unable to close their stake.
Exactly. They would have been soft-locked, unable to claim their principal, unable to claim their returns. They just sit there racking up late penalties until they lost everything. The system would have crushed its most dedicated supporters.
That's incredible. How did they fix such a fundamental flaw?
The main fix was just reducing the max stake days. They dropped it from 50 years all the way down to 5,555 days, about 15 years. That, plus some lucky timing with an Ethereum update that repriced some code, brought the gas cost back under the block limit.
A very near miss. Which brings us perfectly to the controversies. We have to talk about the founder, Richard Hart. His personal history has fueled a lot of criticism.
Right. Operating as Richard Schuler in the early 2000s, he had a public record that included a lawsuit over spam law violations. That history, plus the project's aggressive marketing, has led to it being consistently labeled a Ponzi scheme by critics.
And Richard Hart has responded to those labels directly, hasn't he?
He has. He's famous for saying that HEX employs tactics a scam might use. His supporters see that as refreshing, bold honesty. Critics, well, they see it as a confession.
And things really hit the fan in July 2023 with the SEC lawsuit.
It was a massive legal action. The SEC charged Hart and his whole ecosystem, HEX, PulseChain, and PulseX, with offering unregistered securities and with fraud, alleging he'd raised over $1 billion from investors.
And the misuse of funds part of the complaint was pretty shocking.
Absolutely. The SEC alleged Hart used at least $12 million of investor money on personal luxuries. We're talking sports cars, luxury watches, and most famously, that 555-carat black diamond called the Enigma.
There was also a specific mechanism the SEC called out, something about a HEX flash address.
Yeah, the allegation there was that this was used to recycle funds. The pre-sale looked like it brought in $678 million of ETH, but the SEC claimed the real number was only about $34 million. They alleged the rest was just recycled to create this, misleading appearance of huge investment.
We should give the latest context, though. What's happened since that filing?
Well, by April 2025, the picture had changed. The SEC actually dropped the most severe fraud charges against Hart, but he's still facing other legal issues, including alleged tax evasion and assault in Finland. So the headline billion-dollar fraud charge is gone, but the regulatory heat is definitely still on.
And in terms of the market, the price volatility has just been brutal.
Brutal is the word. HEX hit an all-time high of around 55 cents in late 2021. Since then, between the bear market and all the legal pressure, its market cap has just collapsed. It's down over 99% from its peak.
And what's the deal with PulseChain and PulseX?
That's the newer ecosystem. It's a fork of Ethereum, basically a separate blockchain designed to have lower fees. The newer version of HEX runs on PulseChain, but to get there, users have to bridge their assets over, which adds another layer of complexity.
So this has been a true deep dive. We've gone from automated penalties to a near-fatal contract flaw and all the way to lawsuits involving black diamonds.
It's the perfect case study. You have this really intricate, financially engineered token. It has a clean audit on paper, but it's just surrounded by this constant storm of controversy and huge legal risks tied to its founder and its fundraising.
It really makes you question where the real risk is in these systems.
It does. I mean, we've seen how these intense financial incentives, the penalties and bonuses, can be hard-coded right into a contract. But then you consider the severity of that gas issue they found, a flaw that could have completely locked up the longest stakes because of an external blockchain limit. It raises a really important question for you to think about. How much risk is just baked in to these projects that rely on mathematically guarantees long-term execution, especially when the very ground they're built on, the blockchain itself, is always changing underneath them?